Hi, I'm Irene with girltalksfish, and one of my main secrets for getting rid of algae is floating plants. I love how they suck up all those excess nutrients, they block out too much light from getting to the plants, and the fish love it, especially surface dwellers and fry. The only problem is they do multiply out of control, which can be bad because that can potentially shade out all the plants below so they're not getting enough light, as well as if it covers the entire surface of the tank, it can limit the amount of oxygen in the water for your fish. Ugh. So here's my honest review of 5 floating plants I've kept and which one is my favorite. Number 5 on the list is Salvinia, and it's one of the newer floating plants that I've tried, and it's okay. I mean, I think the most common variety you'll see on the market is Salvinia minima, and the leaves are really small. It's an automatic no-no for any floating plant if it's got really tiny leaves like duckweed, because it makes it so annoying when you have to get rid of some of it because it's starting to cover the entire surface of the water. Another thing is the roots are really tiny as well, so it's not really providing much cover for my small fish. Now, I did just get this bigger species, which I think is called Salvinia cuculate. It has these like small cup-like shaped leaves, and I really like how it grows in these clumps or mats, which makes it really easy to move out if I need to. Now, I just got this species from my local fish store, so I'm not really sure how it's gonna perform in the future, but let's just say in general, I tend to like more uniquely shaped and larger types of Salvinia. I first saw dwarf water lettuce when I was doing a tour of Lily's fish room, which you can see right here. And in one of her guppies tanks, I saw this beautiful floating plant that looked like a green giant flower with rippled petals, velvety texture. I mean, I was in love. I had to have it. She didn't have that much of it, so the one she did give to me, unfortunately, when I put it in my new tank, the long, beautiful roots immediately shed off, and then it ended up melting away, probably from lack of nutrients, now that I'm realizing it. But I was too embarrassed to ask her for another one, so I basically didn't keep it for many years. But finally, I remembered it, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna order some more from Etsy.com, and the seller was great. They actually trimmed off the long roots, so they're only 3 inches long, and they weren't as likely to snap off in transit. And I ended up putting it in this 20-gallon high tank, and it did great. The only problem is I just couldn't figure out how to grow it into that big giant flower form, and instead it would form like little leaves, and then maybe at max the clumps were like about 1.5 inches in diameter. So you know how I feel about small leaves, and eventually I ended up phasing out that plant. But if you do know the secret of how to grow bigger dwarf water lettuce, let me know down in the comments, because I would love to try this beautiful floating plant again. Speaking of floating plants with really, really long roots, let's talk about Amazon frogbit. They are technically 3rd place on my list, but I really, really like this plant. Their leaves are kind of like round and green. They look like little lily pads that are about the size of a nickel to a quarter, but the way they propagate is by sending out runners. So they're all kind of connected together, and it's really easy to like lift out a giant mat of them if you need to remove them. Definitely one of the hardiest floating plants I've kept besides duckweed. And then the really, really long roots are great for small fish to hide in. The only problem is long roots in general tend to snap pretty easily and tear off when you're doing tank maintenance. So what I like to do is make a ring of airline tubing or get one of those floating corrals you can buy online, and then put all the frogbit inside. And that way, when it's time to do a water change, I just unhook the ring from the side of the tank, and then it kind of, all the floating plants stay contained, and then they sink down and then rise with the tide, so to speak. So if you want to see a complete care guide of frogbit, you can check it out over here. Probably the prettiest floating plant I've ever had is red root floaters. I love this plant, and it's another good reason why I liked to use the floating corrals for them, is because A, I can make sure the filter doesn't push down the floating plant, and then B, I can put all the red root floaters positioned directly under the light. And that's how you get it to turn from green to pink to, if there's enough light, like outside, kind of super dark red with even white flowers. So pretty. They have relatively short roots, and they also grow in giant clumps if you don't disturb them, which again makes it really easy to move if you need to. I honestly can't say enough good things about this plant, and in fact I just bought some for this aquarium over here. Got it from a company on Etsy that says they're guaranteed to have no snails and no duckweed, which is a win. The only times I've had problems with this plant would be in the past. I did have some melt because I was using an air pump that was actually too strong. So if the current is way too strong, they don't like that, I just switched out to a gentler air pump. And then also if they escape this corral and end up floating to a darker corner of the tank without enough light, they will also melt in that case. The only reason why redwood floaters aren't number one on my list is because I value low maintenance and easy care over appearances. And the easiest floating plant I've ever owned is floating water sprite. It's really easy to purchase because a lot of times they're sold commonly as a potted stem plant, and a lot of sellers do not like to touch floating plants. The people who are online, they're kind of hard to ship, they melt easily, and honestly, I don't see a lot of my local fish stores selling floating plants either. Number two, it grows extremely quickly, especially once it starts popping up those immersed grown leaves above water, and then it can access CO2 directly from the air. That is why it is actually my go-to plant when I'm trying to cycle a new aquarium, just because it takes off so quickly. Plus, I really love the huge, broad, lacy leaves it puts out. It really provides a ton of shade, which is great for blocking out the light on things like Anubias and other slow-growing plants that are really prone to growing algae. Just be careful that you don't get lazy on maintenance like I did, where it ends up shading out the other plants in the aquarium that do need it. Like in my case, it ended up outcompeting my Pocostem installatus and dwarf aquarium lilies. So you just gotta, it's a really big plant, so it's very easy to move it out and then propagate it to another tank if you like. Floating plants are definitely one of the easiest plants to grow, but if you are interested in my honest opinion of 10 other beginner aquarium plants, check it out over here. Take time to enjoy your aquariums, and I'll see you in the next video.